This is actually kind of a two-part talk that's related. The first part is about Future Day. Today is March 1st, and March 1st is actually Global Future Day. And so there are events being held around the world for Future Day. Future Day was founded on, or at least it was formulated on September 15th, 2011. And it was connected with something called Humanity Plus, and which is kind of related to the transhumanist movement, but they want people to be thinking forward into the future and trying to engage people, learn about something called strategic. Has anyone here heard of Future Day before? We have a couple, most have not. Okay, one of the exciting things about Future Day, and one reason we didn't organize a Future Day here in the Bay Area was because BIL was already being held, and we didn't want to do the conflict because this was already pre-existing here. But there's a good chance March 1st will fall on a different day than BIL will next year, because March 1st won't be on a Saturday next year, I don't think. And it provides a good place for people to get together and kind of talk about the future. And it's a little bit like this, where often you may have a keynote address, but there will be short talks, and people talk about particular projects, particular ideas they have about the future. So I would encourage people to get involved with whatever Future Day is happening, wherever you do live, or to conduct one here in the area. And it's also a community building exercise where the people you bring to Future Day, the conversation can go on beyond March 1st. Last year I was actually in Australia at their Future Day in Melbourne, Australia, and it was kind of neat. One of the people who was speaking was actually a miner, and so he told stories about the outback, and he then told stories about robotics in the outback, how they're using all sorts of mining equipment to try to go into the mines where it's tough for people to get into. And so that was one of the ones that stuck in my mind. There were several very interesting ones. Okay, the next topic I'd like to talk about, or are there any questions on Future Day? Is anyone already getting excited about organizing one wherever they are? It doesn't have to be a big fancy event. Okay, the site for that is futureday.org. And if you go on, some of the talks are videotaped. Admittedly, some of the ones in Australia aren't necessarily as exciting or as world-shaking, earth-shaking as some of the things you have in the San Francisco Bay Area. But on the other hand, sometimes you feel like you're in the field a little bit more, where people are doing real stuff like mining stuff. It's kind of a different atmosphere, but it's kind of a neat atmosphere, and one that I myself miss. I regret not being in Melbourne this year to be at their Future Day event. Okay, how many people here saw the Science of History thing? Is that of any interest to anybody? The Science of History. I'm seeing blank faces, which may just be the light in my eyes, I'm not really sure. Let me talk a little bit about this, because actually I think this is a really interesting thing. I think it's really important. One of the things in our society, I used to be in politics. I was in high school, and I came from a place called the Rust Belt. And if you come from a place called the Rust Belt, you know things can't be too great there, right? Factories were being closed, a lot of people were losing houses. And the problem is a lot of these factory workers had put all of their money, most of their savings were in their house. So when the factories closed down, everyone in the city was trying to, these are small towns, were trying to sell their house at the same time. So all of a sudden houses became worthless, and their life savings became worthless. And of course they couldn't really find jobs that would pay anything like what they used to earn. So this left quite an impression upon me. And so I went into politics, and in politics I met some people who, politicians all have a bad reputation, but I can assure you that a lot of the politicians go into politics with very good motives and very good intentions. And they are trying to do the right thing, whether they're Republican or Democrat, at least in their minds they are trying to do the right thing. And very passionate about it. But when I was in politics, and I had some success with politics, but the problem is that if you're riding the wave that politics is going on, if you're kind of going in that direction, and you want to keep riding the wave that way, you will probably do well in politics. But as soon as you try to do something different to make change and get off the wave, you all of a sudden lose your role in politics, your power diminishes, and at least your apparent power diminishes, and you lose the ability to at least try to make the change. So if you stay popular and ride the wave, you can't make any change that wasn't going to happen anyway. But if you don't ride the wave, you lose your position, you still can't make any change. and it was frustrating. And also I felt that we really didn't know what we were doing. Unemployment was really high. This interest rates were like 20%, or actually up to 22% in housing. Imagine what that could do to an economy. Inflation was soaring. And like I said, the politicians wanted to do much, but they didn't have the tools, they didn't really understand things. So I felt that I needed to learn how society really works. And I think a lot of us have an intuitive feel for parts of how society works. But it was like trying to drive a car somewhat blindfolded or through a through deep fog. You can kind of go slowly and not crash into anything, but if you try to go fast, your life is in peril. So I tried and looked at a lot of things to try to find the science of society. And I took political science courses. And political science is fascinating, but it's not really a science. I took some sociology courses. Sociology should be a science of society, and they're very good for certain types of problems, but they're not really a science of overall society. And looked at a few other types. I looked at history. But someone told me, if you want a science of society, go back and get a degree in physics. So I did. I went and got a degree in physics. And it took me a long time to get a degree in physics, as I was often doing it part-time. I was working, and so I'd be stopping and starting. But I spent so long in physics that I got to see a lot of stuff and learn a lot of stuff. And so I finally got a breakthrough in physics that led to me at least figuring out how to approach a science to society. But let me look at the field and help you look at the field a little bit. Are there any politicians here, sociologists, historians? Okay, good. So you probably no one will kill me yet. Okay.
I was chairman of a UN committee.
The which?
Chairman of the UN Disarmament and National Security Committee.
Okay, so you may kill me yet. We've talked about disarmament, so hopefully. Let's see. So you have political science, which is kind of supposed to talk about society, but really trains you to be a very good congressional staffer. Sociology is supposed to be a science of society, but they're often the money seems to be like in criminal sociology or those sorts of specialized problems. You think history would be perfect. History's kind of like to describe society. And what's really weird is you have like future studies, but in physics, let's look at physics. In physics, we don't have past physics and future physics. It's just kind of one field. And same thing with astronomy. Astronomy, everything's in the past that we're looking at just about, sometimes billions of years in the past. But it's really weird how the social sciences are so fragmented. And you think sociology and history would have a lot to share with each other. They're often trying to talk about the causes of social events, and yet these communities don't really seem to communicate with each other. And if you've heard differently, I'd like to hear, because I'm trying to find people in these fields. And you think the psychologists and the historians would be talking, sometimes they talk with the sociologists, but they're not really talking to each other anyway. And that's often because motivations in each field are very, very different. Psychologists often go into their field to help individual people. Historians, I think either they're interested in history or they like to be, they're like to be scholars and very wise, kind of armchair generals, so to speak. So I'm trying to get these people to talk with each other, and it's kind of interesting because there are actually people looking into a science of society now, but they're not actually in those fields. One of them is Peter Turchin, who's a biologist over in, he's in Connecticut, although he's in Denmark at the moment, but he's associated with, I believe, University of Connecticut. Another person who began looking at this a little bit was Rod Swenson, who was, I believe he was a significant other of Wendy O, who was a punk rock star. And he did get a degree in psychology, but he's mainly an entrepreneur and a musician. And so you have people from very disparate backgrounds who still aren't in the social sciences per se. The one area that does come somewhat close to being a science of society is economics. They're quantitative, they do have certain principles. The problem is that they make certain assumptions that are often not valid, or that's not that valid. They're valid within a range, but once you get outside the range of that validity, a lot of things, things fall apart. I mean, you saw the global financial crisis, which surprised quite a few people. So, yes, 5 minutes, okay. So let me speed up a little bit. So, and then in physics, how many of you have heard really any really big physics breakthroughs in the last 50, 60 years? Higgs boson, right? Right, but that was predicted like 50 years ago. So we're just confirming things. And if you confirm things in physics, the physicists will be very grateful. And he probably will, maybe, anyway, he will go down in history for that. But there hasn't really been any big advances in that field either. They're kind of stuck in a rut. So let's pull it all together. So I always hated the second law of thermodynamics. That's entropy shall tend to increase. And so I was trying to disprove it. And I tried to disprove the second law of thermodynamics. A lot of people have. Most people don't believe in it. And if you can do anything you put your mind to, you should be able to disobey the second law of thermodynamics at will, freely, right? But my observation showed me, no, this was not the case. So I said, well, life and consciousness, they can overcome the second law. But every time I looked, the presence of life actually sped up the progression of the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, and I said, well, civilization, that can overcome it. But same thing, the more civilized, the more industrialized, it seems like we're progressing even further. So I came upon a realization, and this is a tough thing to swallow. I was depressed for a while after that, really depressed. Couldn't get out of bed for a while, which was an issue with work, but we caught up. And that there seems to be, and that's that systems seem to configure themselves to maximize the rate of entropy production. Okay? That life actually seems like a bridge from a lower level of entropy to a higher level of entropy. Civilization, intelligence, even more so. Okay? And so, but what's interesting is that there's this uniform tendency that affects life, where if life and civilization have a role in cosmology, in our physical universe, then we have a driving force for the social sciences. We have something that can unify all the social sciences together, a unifying framework. It's just like the astronomers have gravity to hold together the solar system, the galaxies, and things like that. You can use this, and I call it the principle of fast entropies. Another person, Ross once called like the law of maximum entropy production. You can use this as essentially astronomers use gravity, to come up with principles for social science. And then the important stuff is, just like in physics, if I put my hand here and there's gravity, if gravity was the only force, my hand would fall through here, I would fall to the center of the earth. But there's things pushing back, like this table holds my hand up, and so you can use gravity to characterize the force that this table is holding up. So I'm working to put together the science of society, and I think there's going to be some really big breakthroughs, because there's all sorts of big data sources, wiki data, Peter Turchin is trying to create a data warehouse, I am myself. So look for big breakthroughs in here. My website is historydynamics.org or .com, and the thermodynamics site is fast.org, and I'm coming up with a thermodynamics education site as well. So I'm hoping that this science will show you that there are very serious challenges that we face that people aren't even talking about, but hopefully it'll show the challenges to overcome, or the solutions to overcome those challenges, and hopefully we'll have a much better society because of it. Are there any questions? Yes?
What are the principal types of entropy that civilization and life are accelerating?
I'm sorry? What are the principal types of entropy that life is accelerating, that society is accelerating?
Okay, in physics, I try to, sometimes I use analogies, but I try to stick to the physics definitions as closely as possible. In physics, entropy is defined as something called the log of multiplicity, and I'd be happy to talk with you offline about what multiplicity is. So literally increasing the log of multiplicity. Now, people hate entropy. Entropy equals death, and so I'm the messenger who's going to tell you you're going to die even quicker than possible due to this fast entropy, this Newton's law of thermodynamics. So let's put it another way. Let's not call entropy entropy. Let's call it achievement, and let's call the potential for achievement, the potential. So instead of calling it trying to maximize the rate of entropy production, let's call it trying to maximize the rate of achievement of potential. Okay? So just think of that life helps the universe achieve its potential faster. But it's just a straight physics type of thing. It's just straight physics entropy. Burning coal. burning oil, using sunlight, making the earth darker, that sort of thing. Yes, Max.
Question. So I've sort of wrestled with the same idea, and there's an excellent book written by Lynn McGillis called "What Is Sex?" Right? And my parents gave it to me when I was really young, and I was like, oh my gosh, sex. But it turns out that she also posits, right, life as an agent that helps achieve entropy faster.
Oh, I didn't know that. Huh.
And one of the struggles I had with that is that even if life does not exist, right, the sun is still going to burn out, right? So irregardless of whether or not we're here sort of using the sun as an energy gradient or not, like the sun's going to exhaust itself, and so the other side. So in that sense, I don't really see how.
I define life. I define life as a physicist, and for me, anything that's producing entropy is alive. And so the sun is a complex structure that in the absence of the sun, you would have this gas that would just generally cool off due to gravitational contraction. But the sun forms a complex entity that can then achieve fusion, which in fusion uses up energy, or essentially produces entropy much quicker than just a gas contractually.
Oh, so you would define the sun as being part of it?
I'm not a biologist, but as a physicist, I would define it as being alive. Not conscious, but alive. And anyway, that gives you an unambiguous definition of life. If something's producing entropy, it's alive. If it's not, that's not alive. Yes?
So are you saying that given two sociological outcomes, you would predict that one will happen, it's more likely because it's going to produce more entropy? Is that the basis of your idea?
To a certain extent, yes. And you see this all the time, that there's a big oil field, and the conservationists want to protect it, and the oil companies want to go after it. It seems like most of the time the oil companies win, but they don't win all the time. And just like I said, there's this force trying to push us toward, toward a higher level of entropy, or as you go toward entropy, higher entropy, you go toward equilibrium. A force trying to pull us down to equilibrium. There are these counteracting forces. And human psychology, conservation, those can be counteracting forces. And just so it's possible to dam up a river to help maybe help an ecosystem or at least produce clean energy, it's possible to rearrange our society so that we can manage a production of entropy in a way that's much more, I guess, beneficial to ourselves and the environment. We don't have to go blindly. We're not stupid. So. But this will give us a tool to help do these, to make these decisions and understand these things more intelligently. Okay, I think we just got up.